The recollection of forms of spirit in James Joyce's Finnegans Wake. Continuing. Underneath the memorialum. You will find some of the words here, they're not actually typos, they are actually taken from the Wake. We've got on to associative memory. Trespassing on the space question, that's from the Wake too. Starts really getting philosophical now. In Joycean manner, anyway. Right, chapter 5 of the Wake concerns a curious and cryptic letter placed under scrutiny with the aim of ascertaining if this is the same letter as the one that apparently originated in Boston, Massachusetts. And the connection there is most likely Frederick Myers, founder of the Society for Psychical Research, who had a hankering after the setting up of a mediumistic contact between Boston and the British Isles. If it should indeed be the case that the letter is an instance of cross-corresponding spirit writing, a trans-done boy script, then it becomes apparent enough why it is referred to as a transcript and why it looks as though it was written in two places at the same time by the two girls, who are the source of HCE's guilt in Boston, and by Anna and Shem in Dublin. That is from Clive Hart's book on the Wake. That suggestion. The letter has been scratched out of a midden. Sean is crucified upon a midden later on in the Wake. Hence, the letter being scratched out of a midden connects with the Wake's motif of fall and resurrection. By a slant-eyed hen. ALP is a mother hen that scratches out of a dung heap the torn scrap of a gossipacious letter filled with all the secrets of a woman's heart, a bewitching letter which, only partially recovered, tantalizes with its life riddle through every page of Finnegans Wake. The entire book, in fact, is but a dreamlike emanation of this untitled manifesta memorializing the Most Highest. That is from Campbell and Morton's Skeleton Key of Finnegans Wake. The letter is characterized thus. Dear whom it proceeded to mention Maggie, well and all at home's health, well only the hate turned the milk on the Van Houtens, and the General's elections with the lovely face of some born gentleman, with a beautiful present of wedding cakes, for dear thank you, Christy, and with grand fun for all of poor Father Michael, don't forget until life's a muggy, well are you Maggie, and hope soon to hear well, and must now close it with fondest to the two inns, with 4 cross kisses, for Holy Paul, Holy Corner, Holy Poly, Holy Island, P.S. from affectionate, large-looking Taché of Ch. Taché, French. A spot, a mark, a stain, Ch. An exclamation to mark annoyance or irritability, Chai. Pan-Slavonic tea. A tea stain on this letter assumes great importance. In fact, the final word in the wake is the te, the French word for tea. So, the letter terminates with a tea stain, something on the face of it contingent and inconsequential. And yet, as it happens, proves to be a major recurring motif in the wake. The very last word of the wake references tea, te, French. The tea stain first puts it in its appearance in chapter 1. There'll be bluebells blowing in salty sepulchres the night she signs her final tear. The end. But that's a world a ways away. A salty grave awaits Anna Olivia when, as the river Liffey, she disappears into the sea. Zee is Dutch for sea. This is a cross-reference to the end of the book, given away alone, a lost, a last, a loved, along the Joyce writing the final pages of The Wake in September 1938 and explained that the last word was te. The was the final pondered upon as the final yes of Ulysses. In Ulysses, to depict the babbling of a woman going to sleep, I had sought to end with the least forceful word I could possibly find. I had found the word yes, which is barely pronounced, which denotes acquiescence, self-abandon, relaxation, the end of all resistance. In Work in Progress, which is what the wake was referred to before it was eventually published, I tried to do better if I could. This time I have found the word which is the most slippery, the least accented, the weakest word in English, a word which is not even a word, which is scarcely sounded between the teeth, a breath, a nothing, the article the. That is from an article by Gillet, quoted in Ellman's book on Joyce. So, the letter terminates with a tea stain, something contingent and inconsequential. And yet, as it happens, it will prove to be a major recurring motif in the narrative, acquiring extraordinary symbolic symbolism. As we there are where we are, we there, from tom tit tot to tea to tom totalitarian, tt to tt suggesting titty there, by the way, because this is Joyce after all. The tea stain is evoked in the discussion of the process of creation and the enigma of existence. Here we are, whence have we come, and where, after all, are we? Unde et ubi, rather. My Latin is a bit rusty. Whence and where? For whether we be mere tom-tit-tots, or the sum total of existence, here it is we are, and here too is the motherly cup of tea. Tea, suggesting titty, as I said. But that's also, of course, the source of an infant's brew of life, the primary image of motherly nourishment. Tea may also be read as Tia, divine, or goddess. And T is for Tristan, as in the legend of Tristan and Isolde, which features in the wake. The time-stained terminal is a cosy little brown study all to oneself, from which we can discover much that is edifying with regard to the distinction between meaningful associations and simple coincidences. Anna the Almazeval. Is invoked, followed by an extensive list of other mutually exclusive appellations by which such an untitled manifesta memorializing the most highest had been known at different historical periods, including Groans of a Britoness, a woman of the world who only can tell naked truths about a dear man and all his conspirator, how they all tried to fall him by putting it all around Lucilozid, Lucalizod, about private earwicker and a pair of sloppy sluts, plainly showing all the unmentionability, falsely accusing about the raincoats, the latter the usual garment, of course, of someone about some tawdry business, as Humphrey probably was in the park. His sin is never really specified, but you can imagine some weirdo in a raincoat in a park. Anyway, accusing about the raincoats. As for the letter itself, this is the letter that they are analysing. Naive paleographers would have ascribed it to the scribbling of a purely delinquent recidivist, but to the inquiring entomologist, it reveals a sex mosaic of nymphomania in which HCE finds himself infatuated with two Vanessas. Now, in the dreamer's bedroom, above the window, there is a pyramid featuring the seal of Dublin, which is three burning castles, which is the three soldiers in the dream, flanked by two female figures, a pair of sloppy sluts, on either side of a shield. One of the significant associations in the narrative is between the sin in the park committed by HCE and this seal. As for the two Vanessas, Jonathan Swift was in love with two women, Esther Stella Johnson and Esther Venetia van Humrig. Here they connect with the two Ginnies of HCE's guilt. It is evident that an assemblage of personages had been brought to bear upon the document, and prior to any appropriate occasion arising for a crime, or crimes to have been committed, an awareness or an anticipation regarding such deeds may well haphazardly have been made upon consideration of the content of this very document. For under the close eye of scrutiny, the ostensible chaos and confusion eradicates itself, and the ambiguities resolve themselves into a more or less stable condition, much like life itself. Though to all appearances it is a continuum comprised rather of an endless succession of unconnected and discrete, though reiterating, occurrences. Only to all appearances indeed, for relations are at the very heart of existence and of the wake. Nothing can exist outside of a relationship with something else, and in virtue of the relationship to something, the thing relating with and the thing relating to are internally mutually affecting each other. Subjectivity and experience run all the way down, for everything is a dynamic process of sensations, events, ideas, what you will, rather than mere objects bouncing off one another in thoughtless, mechanical fashion. Prehension we're talking about here. Whereby a perceiver incorporates aspects of a perceived thing into itself. A cataleptic metaphalic. A somewhat rigid direct apprehension. From catalepticos. My Greek is not much better than my Latin. In other words, non-existent. Catalepticos. To the Stoic philosophers, self-evident impressions, the grasping of a concept where knowledge begins. We shall pray till, in the search for love of knowledge, through the comprehension of the unity in altruism, through stupefaction. To read the Wake as though the things and events it describes were without logical connections with other things and events, and any one of which could disappear without necessarily affecting anything else, is to take a view of the narrative as one would of the world itself, as a midden of the kind we were presented with in the narrative's opening chapter. But with the understanding, we are now beyond that stage. Sean, if we suppose that it is he who is scrutinizing the letter, wonders who on earth wrote the darn thing anyhow. Well, Hegel apparently. Say, Baron Lucidor, who in Hegel wrote the darn thing anyhow? Has it been brought from out of a gloomy, confused, and cheerless mind, or a perspicacious one? Was it penned by a down-to-earth simpleton in the street, or by a bespectacled professor burdened with a load of learning? Prior to his being able to answer any of these questions, the examiner reflects upon the known facts surrounding the letter and constructs his connections and associations. If, after years upon years of technical skill, the scholar solemnly informs us that the great ascendant of the letter HCE was, properly speaking, 3 syllables less than his own surname, Eorica, that he did not in fact exist, and that the so-called Ear was nothing more than a trademark, and Wicca simply local cant for an aeronaut. Then where on earth are we to go for an opinion that can be relied upon regarding this radio-oscillating epipistle? Where is the bright so-and-so who can slip us the dinkum oil? Dinkum oil, that is the truth. A very good question indeed, for we should not leap to uncalled for conclusions. To conclude from the absence of political odia and monetary requests. Naysayers we know to conclude purely negatively from a positive absence of political odia and monetary requests that its page cannot ever have been a pen product of a man or woman of that period, or those parts, is only one more unlooked for conclusion leaped at, being tantamount to inferring from the non-presence of inverted commas, sometimes called quotation marks, on any page that its author was always constitutionally incapable of misappropriating the spoken words of others. Political odia. and monetary requests in the letter that it could not have been written by such a person of such a period at such a place, tantamount to inferring from the absence of inverted commas that the author or authors was or were incapable of misquoting, or maybe of strict plagiarism, or perhaps chance similarities are in evidence. Were we to transfer such scrutiny to the letter, to that of the Wake as a whole, one thing at least becomes apparent. To Joyce, Samuel Beckett said, to Joyce reality was a paradigm, an illustration of perhaps an unstable rule. It is not a perception of order or of love, more humble than either of this. It is a perception of coincidence. Some concrete cases are found to support Beckett, although I disagree with him. This is from Robert Anton Wilson's book Coincidences, which I've mentioned before. Of mere coincidences instigated by a dream, Carl Jung had a dream about Liverpool, England, that he considered so important that he analysed it and wrote about it at length. Liverpool was a pun on pool of life, he decided, and signified rebirth. Years later, Peter O'Halloran of the World Coincidence Centre in Berkeley, I may pop by there by chance someday, analysed the dream more carefully, and decided the details fitted only one street intersection in Liverpool. At that place was the cafe where the Beatles first performed, and on the same spot later was the science fiction theatre of Liverpool, where my play, this is Wilson speaking, Wilson's play, Illuminatus appeared. A large part of the play takes place aboard a yellow submarine, inspired by a Beatles song, and Jung himself is a character in the play. Jung certainly had such a dream, and it did signify for him a kind of psychic rebirth. One has to be cautious, though, not to assimilate Liverpool, the city, with the pool of life. Jung, understandably enough, conducted a Jungian dream analysis whereby he went to the root of the word, liver, an essential organ, regulator of the metabolism, and one can see why it would suggest rebirth, and why it would be of interest to Joyce himself, given the Wake's theme of rebirth and resurrection. It is the only organ with cells that regenerate after disease damage like hepatitis, or after other abuses to which it is subjected to. Liverpool sought a bit of it. His brains cold porridge. It's cold porridge. His brains were cold porridge. His pelt dashy. His heart's a drone. His bluid streams a crawl. His puff but a piff. His extremities extremely. Now, Jung also noted that the city Liverpool was dirty, and he assimilated this to his actual psychic state, being dark and gloomy. The Troyer of towns and Carmen of cities, crawling with mendiants in perforated clothing, gets its well-beloved white like Liverpool in Manchester. Manchester, it says there, Manchester. That's from the Wake. Home, Stock and Steddon, Liverpool Mark. Lorg, Hogs, 1-4 Tups, Norving, Big Butter Boost, sorry, thank you. I'm not even sure, I can't always tell whether it was a typo actually. Maybe that should be thank you, I don't know, I can't remember. That'll be all for Tory. But Jung's unconscious revealed to him that he was passing through a period of individuation, the process of self-realization, finding one's own purpose in life, and it was in fact at the end of a cycle. He had thus reached a new state in his psychic enlightenment, centering himself into his consciousness and the whole universal consciousness. The dream shows him that he had succeeded, and his remarks concerning Liverpool are his personal interpretations about his own life and have nothing to do with the city. Which is a pity, because I'm actually at Liverpool University. Anyway, Wilson is barking up the wrong tree. Pool of life, pool of light, the sun, the oldest myth, the life provider on earth, so it goes, drowning in dream symbols. You says it is a puling sample jungle of woods. On the matter of universal consciousness, Herb Asher, the protagonist of Philip K. Dick's novel, The Divine Invasion of 1981, I think it was, although I have the 1991 edition there, postulated a theory. You think James Joyce was crazy? Is that what you think? Okay then. Explain to me how come he mentions talk tapes, which means audio tapes, in a book he wrote starting in 1922 and which he completed in 1939, before there were tape recorders. You call that crazy? He also has them sitting around a TV set in a book started 4 years after World War I. It is impossible that James Joyce could have mentioned talk tapes in his writing. I'm going to prove that Finnegans Wake is an information pool based on computer memory systems that didn't exist until a century after Joyce's era, that Joyce was plugged into a cosmic consciousness from which he derived the inspiration for his entire corpus of work. Which is a very entertaining idea, and a perfect example of constructing a great deal out of a simple coincidence. Whatever expresses a truth about oneself becomes one's identity. Not country, nor birth, and what one really feels is the truth about oneself. For whatever happens in one's life, one will keep this ultimate truth up to the end of it. This is Jung's basic thinking, as will be seen with Anna Livia. Now the line he was referring to, tuck up your sleeves and loosen your talk tapes, that is from the chapter with the two washerwomen. So whatever talk tapes means, I'm not entirely sure, but presumably it is there to evoke the idea of talking laundry. It does not mean tape recorders. That's a coincidence. So, as I was saying, I disagree about coincidences. A coincidence is none other than a seemingly, while unremarkable, concurrence of events or circumstances without apparent causal connection, and that can be discerned anywhere where one to look for them, and are generally meaningless and uninteresting. Now, this is when I bring Hegel in, and I should have put this passage on the slide, but anyway, I could put it in the description. Scientific cognition, Hegel said, demands surrender to the life of the object, or what amounts to the same thing, confronting and expressing its inner necessity. This is from the Phenomenology of Spirit. The specific difference of a thing is rather its limit. It is where the thing stops, or it is what the thing is not. The concern with aims or results, with differentiating and passing judgment on various thinkers is therefore an easier task than it might seem, for instead of getting involved with the real issue, die Sache selbst, the heart of the matter. This kind of activity is always a way beyond it. Instead of tarrying with it and losing itself in it, this kind of knowing is forever grasping at something new. It remains essentially preoccupied with itself instead of being preoccupied with the real issue and surrendering to it. Because we are now at the form of spirit, which is the understanding. If I made that clear, I can't remember if I did or not. We are dealing with an expression of this form of spirit that is the understanding, knuckling down and grappling with the real issue, with the meaningful, the necessary connections. In the movement towards understanding, there is more to it than a mere perceiving or looking at. Understanding becomes necessary once a question arises concerning why. Once one answers the why, one has understood whatever it is that is to be understood, and then everything becomes a movement of discovering why things are as they are, and one embarks upon a way of thinking about the world whereby one not only perceives it, but comprehends it too, in some manner. Why? Then how? To finish for now from the Wake. But one who deeper thinks will always bear in the back buckus of his mind that this downright there you are and there it is only all in his eye. Why? And why spell dear God with a big thick D? Why, oh why, oh why? To be continued. Meanwhile, we can share a cup of tea with a delightful lady. Although this painting actually is called Disappointment, which I hope you are not experiencing just now. I will see you later.